Well, good morning and welcome to all of you. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us here at Kingwood Christian Church, whether you're worshiping here in the sanctuary or whether you're joining us online. We're so glad that you've chosen to join us today. We have a beautiful, beautiful service in store for you today. And so I'd like to invite you into just making some preparations. If you're here in the sanctuary, I invite you into just a quiet few moments as we enjoy our prelude to just prepare your hearts and minds for worship. If you're at home, I encourage you to find some communion supplies. Of course, our bulletin is available online, and then you can sing along with us, and then you can participate in Holy Communion with us. So I encourage you, if you don't have those supplies lined up and in front of you, I encourage you to find those supplies so that you can be a part of all of the elements of worship for us today. And so now let us all take just a quiet moment, enjoy the beauty of our prelude, and prepare our hearts and minds for worship. Invite you to join us in our call to worship. There's going to be a spoken piece and then there'll be a sung response. I invite you to join in. The buzz of the world interrupts our lives. It fills our ears with noise. Call us into your way of life, O God.
O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me.
The disagreements and quarrels of others settle in our mind and cloud our vision. Lead us into your vision of life, O God.
O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me.
The cries of the poor, the oppressed, and the outcast pierce our hearts. Guide us into your example of living for others, O God.
O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me.
Call us to your table and fill our hearts and eyes and ears with your love, O God. Let us be your hands and feet in the world. Amen.
Now please join me in singing all 4 verses of Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already gone. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Living God, lead us into a quiet moment here. Allow us to fully enter into your presence as we're surrounded by friends and family, a safe space, a place of acceptance, a place of love and grace. The anthem, Amazing Grace, calls us back to our roots, calls us back to an essential understanding of what your heart is like. That you do not look at us with judgment and shame and contempt, but God, that you look at us with an unmerited favor, that your heart just does that naturally, that you are connected to us and offer this kind of love to us. And it's not dependent upon what we do. It's not dependent upon how we respond to it even. But that it just simply represents who you are. And so God, might we kind of enter into that space. May we kneel, may we draw close, lean in to that picture of you, to that representation of who you are. A God of grace, a God of love, not judgment. A God that calls us close, draws us near, makes space for everyone around the table. God, might we enter more intentionally into that school of thought, that way of living. Might we evaluate who we are and why the church exists through that essential that Jesus passed along to us. One commandment that would encapsulate them all, that we would love God, that we would love self, and that we would love neighbor. Might we always be holding that up as our standard, as the commandment that calls us forward. Might that always be right at the heart of our congregation of Kingwood Christian Church. A place of love. God, we lay all of our different cares and needs, so many challenges that we're facing in the world, loved ones and friends that are hurting, those still impacted by the storm, those impacted by the virus, those feeling isolated, those feeling angry and unheard. God, we ask that your comfort, that your presence would surround them, and that we, in appropriate ways, would come to them in kindness with soft hearts as well. God, join us in this gathering. Join us in these sacred moments. Be honored by our songs and our prayers, but be our teacher as well. And help us to be so very receptive to what you might want to say to us today. So now let us all gather in the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Okay, guys, I have a question for you. What does it mean when somebody interrupts you, when there's an interruption? Yes, Lucia?
It means like you
Loud.
have. It means like you have to do it over and over again until somebody hears you.
Because what happens when they interrupt you? What are they doing?
So like, it's like not listening to you. Like, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Okay, Alina, you had something you wanted to add?
It's what she said.
So if you're talking and somebody interrupts you, what did they just do?
They would basically be like,
Yeah, they just start talking.
when you are saying something,
And then how does that make you feel?
not that happy about it.
Yeah, I have another question. Scoot over here. In our family, do we ever have problems with people interrupting each other? Really? When does that ever happen?
A lot of times.
A lot of times? Like when? Give me an
A lot of
example. Use your loud voice and give me an example.
Whenever It just happens a lot.
Like if maybe when I'm driving you home from
Yeah.
school in the
That
van, that's what I'm
happens.
thinking
That's
about.
when
Can you
it
scoot right here so
happens.
they can see you?
A lot.
So what happens in the van? I say, "How was your day?" And what happens then?
Sometimes someone starts talking, but then the other one wants to talk.
Yeah, everybody wants to be the first person to talk, right?
And
What do you want to say?
sort of like in school when when the teacher is talking and then you just start talking, you're just like, what are we gonna do doing this? And she's trying to show you, or he is trying to show you what you do.
Yeah, the teacher doesn't like that very much because they had something they wanted to say, right? Well, sometimes, guys, let me tell you something. Sometimes God actually interrupts our lives. Can you believe that? Like sometimes we have a plan for the way we want things to go, right? We have plans. And then God does something else. God has another plan in mind for us. You know, why do you think that God might do that? Why do you think God might interrupt us sometimes? Alina, loud.
Because he will, like, he has a pattern basically. A bunch of good things will happen, then a bunch of bad things.
Sometimes
will happen,
bad things
and then
happen.
Good things will happen.
Yeah. What do you think, Lucia?
Like when our grandma's
Ceiling?
ceiling collapsed, we as though the bad thing happened, it turned into a good thing. We all helped clean up, and it looked like it was brand new.
Yeah, it was an opportunity for us to help her, right? That's true. So sometimes God interrupts our plans because we definitely did not plan on spending that day cleaning up insulation out of Grandma's room, right?
But yeah, then after that, I had enough money to earn
Okay,
my
but-
new job.
Yeah, but that doesn't really have anything. Yes, that's true. Okay, so sometimes God interrupts our plans, and when he does that, it means that he has something important he wants to teach us or say to us. So it's very important that we listen when God interrupts us, even if it's not what was in our plans, because God always has a good plan for us. He knows everything, so we should probably listen to him, don't you think? Okay, let's say a little prayer. Everybody bow your heads. Dear God, thank you for always having total control over our lives, and thank you for having a good plan for us, even if we don't always understand it. God, help us to listen, even when we feel like what you're doing is an interruption to our life, and help us to trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Not afraid of the dark, but I used to be a little kid hiding on the covers every time the lights turned out. That was then, this is now. The monsters ain't in the closet. The stuff that scares me most is hiding right outside my front door. 'Cause I've grown up and gotten stronger, but my problems got bigger too. As days go by, I'm brought to realize that I never stopped needing you. And I bow my head and say my prayers. I'm asking you for strength. I can't make it on my own, ain't no way. Used to run away from home, but life got too hard. Trees that tree line down the road under a nightlight full of stars. Man, I've come so far. I don't live in the house anymore, but if I'm being honest, I'm still running inside my heart. 'Cause I've grown up and gotten stronger, but my problems got bigger too. As days go by, I'm brought to realize that I'll never stop needing you. So I bow my head and say my prayers. I'm asking you for strength. I can't make it on my own, ain't no way. Oh, Father, Father, I've grown up and gotten stronger, but my problems got bigger too. As days go by, I'm brought to realize that I never stop needing you. So I bow my head, I say my prayers, I'm asking you for strength. I can't make it on my own, ain't no way. Not afraid of the dark, but I used to be.
So let me begin with a question. If you were to try to describe yourself in 3 characteristics, 3 statements, what would you say about yourself? What would you say? You had to pick 3 different things to introduce yourself to someone else. What would you say? If I had to do that, I would start off with, well, I'm the father of Taylor Mattingly, future pop star. I'm also the father of Peyton Mattingly, future NASCAR announcer. And I'm also the husband of Amber Mattingly, who is the new senior pastor of the Heights Christian Church, which is really, really cool. As of last week, she was voted in unanimously, so we're still celebrating that. So exciting, this new season for her. I would also include that I'm an aspiring follower of Jesus. That each and every day my heart is drawn more and more to trying to understand this extraordinary person, the historic person of Jesus, the transcendent person of Jesus. I just want to follow Jesus more and more. So what would you say? What would be the things that would be the characteristics that you would describe yourself if given the opportunity? Well, we were speaking of Jesus. Do you know that Jesus said that there were 3 things? He elevated 3 things about himself that he wanted people to know. He said the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So there was something about him seeking out those that were lost in some kind of mysterious way, and he helped us understand what that was. The second thing that he said was, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. He wanted us to know that about his way. And then the third thing, this is the real peculiar one. He said, I came eating and drinking. That was the third thing that he says. What in the world could he have possibly meant by the fact that he came eating and drinking? I want to make a suggestion. I think that he wanted us to know that his ministry and his life would be right in the middle of the everyday, normal, mundane eating and drinking of life. I mean, don't you plan your day pretty much around when you're going to eat? When you're going to drink? Some of the great conversations, life happens over meals. He wanted us to know that he was going to be right, his ministry would be right in the middle of the average every day. Well, this morning, we continue on in a teaching series entitled 7 Meals with Jesus. Over the next several weeks, we started last week and all the way up into Easter, we're going to be looking at different scenes where Jesus shares a meal with someone and a bunch of different kinds of someones. He had a very inclusive table. He was always inviting different kinds of people, religious people, and then people that have no affiliation to the church at all. And last week, I asked you, we had this set up here. Tess has done a wonderful job of decorating and kind of setting the scene for us for this series. And I ask you to imagine what would it be like to share a meal with Jesus? What do you think that conversation would be like? How unforgettable would it be to share a meal with Jesus? I want you to think about the greatest meal that you ever had, dinner that you've ever had. What made it so great? Do you have something? Do you have one in your mind that you're just like, oh yeah, it's that one? What was it because of the menu? Was it because of the location? Was it because of the service? Was it because of the company? Or was there something else that just set it apart from others? Perhaps even it became sacred in some way, that God even kind of showed up. One comes to mind for me. I was kind of in a transition period out of the first church that I served out of seminary, which is in Washington, D.C., and I just felt God kind of leading me in a new direction. And so I got in contact with this church and this pastor his name is Scott Kilgore, just north of Kansas City. And we didn't know each other very well, but we sat down over a meal. I was thinking about coming to his church and serving with him, and we sat down over a meal, and we just started talking. And we just shared our heart for ministry and heart for Jesus and heart for people and loving and serving the community and making the world a better place and as fathers and husbands and all of this. And within 30 minutes, it was as though we just knew we were kindred spirits. We were brothers. We had no idea who each other were 30 minutes prior. But we were brothers. There was something sacred. It was almost like God showed up in that meal. Have you ever had that experience when God shows up over a meal and something beautiful happens as a result? Let me lead you to our passage today. And I made the mistake of not marking it this morning, so you'll have to give me a moment here to find it. It's going to be on the screen right behind me. Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5, Jesus shares another meal with someone. The scene starts off like this. It says, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at a tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up, and he left everything, and he followed him. So let me set the scene for you for just a moment. Jesus had just healed a paralyzed man, wowed the crowds, everybody is amazed, and then he takes a walk through the city streets. He comes upon a tax collector. He's sitting at his tax collecting booth, probably just doing what he normally does, swindling people out of money, lining his own pockets with anything that he can kind of stuff in there, and that's just kind of the way that tax collectors worked at the time. That was very much their reputation. So he's kind of business as usual. Jesus approaches him. There doesn't seem to be any introduction whatsoever. Jesus approaches him. He looks Levi in the eye and he says, "Follow me." Now, there's some significance to that statement. It's not just as though, hey, follow me down the street. When a rabbi looks at someone and says, "Follow me," it was a significant invitation. It was, follow me with your life. Leave what you're doing, follow me with your life. What does Levi do, this tax collector? Levi immediately stands up, leaves his booth, and follows Jesus. His life in that moment interrupted by an opportunity. And everything changed from that point on. Have you ever been interrupted? Your life. Now, I'm not talking about like somebody interrupts you in a conversation. I'm talking about like really interrupted. Like you were on a path, you had a plan, you're going in this direction, this is who you were going to be, and then your spouse walks up. Or maybe you had a kid. I mean, that's even bigger that we know. If you've been married, you know it's bigger to have a kid. Like everything changes when you have a kid, right? So how about interrupted by a kid, your first child, your second child? Maybe it's the phone rings and it's an opportunity and it takes you across the country or around the world. Some of you have worked in other countries. And it started with a phone call, and it all changed. Or maybe you were interrupted by a pandemic. Anybody? You had plans. 2020 was going to go like this. 2021 was going to go like this. And you were interrupted. Well, I want you to hang with me for just a moment. I want to suggest this morning that Jesus enjoys interrupting us. Jesus enjoys interrupting our business as usual. And I don't want you to explain this away. I don't want you to kind of over-spiritualize it. I don't want it to be like a symbolic interruption or a very spiritual interruption. I'm talking about an actual interruption, that Jesus tries to do that on a regular basis. Do you remember in Matthew 28, the last thing that he said to the disciples before he ascended into heaven? Jesus said, I will always be with you. I will always be with you. Disciples, followers of Jesus, Jesus says to you, I will always be with you. I will always be here, guiding you, encouraging you, but I'll also be interrupting you. When you slowly kind of fade into stagnancy, into lukewarmness, when you stray off this path, this path that Jesus dreams for us, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to try to call you back. I'm going to try to intervene. You know, Levi, I think he relished this interruption, this tax collector. Let's go on to verse 28 or 29. Then Levi gave a great banquet for him. Here's the meal, 7 meals with Jesus. Gave a great banquet for him in his house, and there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others sitting at the table with them. Levi decides to throw a large party, introduce Jesus to all of his friends, as you would. This is an incredible opportunity that's been presented to Levi, and so he does the only thing that he can. He wants to honor Jesus, and he invites all of his friends, but all of his friends were tax collectors, and because tax collectors didn't have any other friends, they just had to hang out together. It's kind of like pastors. That's a different topic, but we're kind of oddballs. But back in that day, tax collectors, no one wanted to hang out with tax collectors. They were scoundrels. And so you can kind of imagine the awkward scene of Jesus, these are my friends. But Jesus didn't feel uncomfortable at all, did he? Jesus had been gathering around tables with people of every sort for a long time at that point. I wonder, do you remember the first time that Jesus interrupted you? Do you remember the first time that Jesus kind of entered in, that Jesus spoke to you, that somehow you were invited in? Maybe it was when you were young, or maybe it was when you were a young adult, or maybe it was not so long ago for you. But when Jesus interrupted you for the very first time, and your mind and your heart and your spirit were open to some greater reality that you were just absolutely just filled with and transformed by. And you had this incredible fervor, right? Do you remember when you first entered into faith and you were introduced to the possibility that life could be so much more than just what you do, what you accomplish? And you started seeing everything different. You saw your family different. You saw your future differently. You saw your friends differently. You saw your finances differently. You might even felt like that God was calling you into something extraordinary, like you were going to change the world. How many of you felt like you were going to change the world for Jesus? But then, days go by and kind of some of that same fervor, it kind of fades. And then before we know it, we've kind of settled into just a comfortable rhythm of faith. We go to church, we read our Bible, we do some prayer times, we bring some non-perishable foods for first fruits. I mean, we have a rhythm. We kind of settled in. This is what it is to be a Christian. This is what it is to be a Jesus follower. Do you think that maybe Jesus needs to interrupt us? Do you think that Jesus might want to cast a new vision over us, over you even specifically you? Right in your moment of life, right here, right now, do you think that Jesus might want to interrupt you even now? I think he does interrupt our business as usual. Oftentimes things get uncomfortable when Jesus does that. He doesn't seem to have a problem with stepping on toes. But he especially is always trying to call the person of faith, the religious person, call them into something bigger because we make God so small sometimes. I came across this story. I don't know if you're familiar with Jen Hatmaker. She's a really wonderful author, very inspiring. She and her husband, they planted this church, and I'm pretty sure it was in the Metroplex area. And it was like this mega church. I mean, it was their dream. They got together. They're both very charismatic, very gifted people. And boy, they started, and it just blew up, this huge church. And they thought that they were kind of living the dream. And it was full of prestige, and it was full of just all of this energy. And they thought that they had arrived. And then, but along the way that it started just becoming so stressful and full of politics, and it was about status, and it was about ladder climbing, and it was kind of like this grind of you got to be so creative every single week, and then she describes a time where she arrived at a place where Jesus interrupted her and said, "Do you remember what you started all of this for? Are you making followers of Jesus here? Are you making, or is the product of this megachurch, is it people whose hearts beat for the kingdom of God?" And so she and her husband walked away from it all. And they went and they started another church. They just focused in on the essentials of what Christian faith is all about, and what the kingdom of God and Jesus' vision for the world and changing the world. Do you think that we've settled into just a comfortable pattern? Do you think that Jesus might want to interrupt us? Let's go on in the scene here. Verse 30. The Pharisees and their scribes were complaining to the disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" That verse, and a lot of other translations, it goes, "But the Pharisees." Jesus is trying to cast this vision for them to see God, like to blow things up, for them to think and dream and have this vision that's so expansive that has the power to transform. And what do the Pharisees do? The unhealthy religious folks, they talk about him in the parking lot. They're out there going, "What in the world? This guy's saying, what's going to happen? We can't catch this. This is not what we signed up for." The Pharisees are notorious for missing the forest for the trees, for being so just intent on following the law that they missed God altogether. And Jesus speaks to these Pharisees, calling them to something bigger. I was talking with the students. I had the opportunity of working with the students for these next several months and maybe longer, who knows. But we're talking about a really important topic. We're talking about racism. We're talking about how that emerged even historically. We're trying to educate ourselves about racism. But one of the things that we came upon last week is just this confession. Somebody asked, "So where do the roots of racism?" And I said, I'm so sorry to have to tell you, but most historians say that the roots of racism, at least in part, are connected directly to religion. And we think to ourselves, how in the world could we have missed the point so badly? How could we have missed Jesus' heart so badly that we could possibly think that because of the color of someone's skin, God would love or appreciate one over another person? That is so far from the heart of God, and yet so oftentimes we can just, little bit at a time, we can start missing the point. We can start prioritizing rules or exclusive statements over what Jesus said was most important. God can become so very small so very quickly. Let's finish up our scene right here. This is verse 31. Jesus answered the Pharisees. He said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick need the doctor. But the assumption is that the sick will recognize their sickness. When Peyton was born, Amber and I, especially in the first few months, he was our first, and so we had nothing to compare. But we recognized that, Peyton was experiencing some challenges. But then as he became a year old and then 2 years old, family and friends started coming alongside us and saying, I think that, you probably ought to have him checked out. And we think that, Peyton is kind of sick right now, and he needs some help. And so we went to this wonderful doctor that specialized in children that are on the spectrum and babies that are on the spectrum and autism. And this wonderful doctor, his name was Dr. Hicks, he came and he put his arms around us and he said, first and foremost, he's going to be okay. Peyton's going to be okay. But he's kind of sick right now. But I'm going to walk right beside you. And we're going to together, week by week, we're going to be in conversation, week by week, month by month, year by year. And we're going to get him well. And he's going to be great. But we had to kind of recognize there was a sickness at first before this doctor could come alongside us and lead us in this path towards health. This is how Jesus couches the entire thing. He said, I want to lead you to be the healthiest person. Wherever you are, whatever your baggage is, whatever your background, I want to lead you to be the healthiest that you can be. Obviously, the Pharisees could not recognize their sickness. They thought that they were the well ones. They thought that it was their charge to assess the sickness of others. Jesus interrupted them. And he said, I want to give you a new measure of spiritual health. Rather than following the letter of the law, I want you to always be asking, are you becoming a more loving person? Now that's the gift. That's the blessing this week. I told you last week that every single one of these sermons would have you walking out of here with this incredible blessing, and this week is just the simplicity of what Jesus said to us. It's not as though we discard the laws. Don't hear me say that. There's some important things. There's doctrines and theologies that are important anchors for us, but if it doesn't all end, if it isn't all moving towards making us more loving towards God and self and neighbor, then we have missed the gift. We've missed the reward. We've missed the way that Jesus wants to change the world. And so don't miss it. Don't miss it. In the end, healthy life, by the measure of Jesus, amounts to how well, how deep, how wide, how extravagantly we love. And so with that in mind, I invite you to come and join me at the communion table. We come to this table with a confession that kind of binds us together. It puts us on an even plane. It's the only confession for the Christian church, disciples of Christ. Would you say it with me now? We confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and we proclaim him Lord and Savior of the world. It was in the Gospel according to John that Jesus said, "A new law I give you." Right after he washed their feet, right after they shared the meal, he gave them a new law. He said, "Just as I have loved you, so you love one another." Let this law be on full display, this law of love. Let it be on full display. Let this law be your calling card to the world. Let this love sink deeply and be written on your heart. This love gives all, but it has the power to change everything. And so we come and we remember when Jesus gathered with his disciples, and we are invited just as we are by God's grace to gather and to partake. Jesus took a loaf of bread and he blessed it and he broke it. He said, "This is my body broken for each of you. Take it and eat it, remembering me when you do. Remembering the way that I loved and you are called to love." After he took the loaf, he took the cup and he said, "This is my blood, the blood of a new covenant, a new relationship based on grace and mercy and love. Take it and drink it." He said, "All of you, remembering me when you do." Invite you to come and to take these elements, to peel back the cellophane here, to take this wafer as nourishment for your soul, as a recommitment, a statement of recommitment, saying that Jesus is my way. Jesus' love will be my love. May this be an anchor for you, an anchor for our church moving forward. So let's pray. God, we give you thanks for sending Jesus to us, for the wisdom, for the grace and the mercy, and for the incredible gift, the reward of following in his way and embracing his vision for the world. May we be just endlessly committed, devoted in these incredibly challenging times. We love you. Be honored. We pray in the name of Christ. Amen.
First up, thank you to everyone who made it out for the property work day yesterday. The youth group will meet today from 4 to 5:30 p.m. outside. However, please note that there was a typo in today's printed worship guide. There will be no pizza at today's event, so don't come expecting pizza. Today is the final day for Week of Compassion donations. Collection boxes are in the narthex. Feed My Lamb service project is Tuesday, March 2nd. Please meet in the fellowship hall at 10:30 a.m. The KWCC website has a new look and feel. Be sure to check it out and email the office with any questions you may have. And finally, last week I mentioned the hats project that the church is doing for teachers in our area and wherever. We had our first session last Thursday, and it was incredible. As someone who is very high-strung, stressed out, and anxious all the time, I found myself really kind of calmed down after that one. So if it helped me, I know it can help a lot of people. So if you know a teacher, if you are a teacher, or if you have friends on Facebook that you maybe have talked to once or twice in the past 10 years, but they're a teacher, please reach out and let them know that our next session on Zoom is this Wednesday, March 3rd. And you can check out all of the dates on the website, hatsproject.org. Now, please join me in singing our final hymn today, Hope of the World. We will sing all 5 verses.
Save us from death and dark despair, from sin and guilt. We render back the love your mercy gave us. Take now our lives and use them as you will. Hope of the world, O Christ, o'er death victorious, who by this sign did conquer grief and pain. We would be faithful to your gospel glorious. You are our Christ, and you forever reign.
The step of discipleship requires commitment and faith. Go now in peace, bringing the good news of Jesus' love to all people. Do not be afraid. God is with you. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next Sunday.